Hey, from the get-go, dominate. Don't give him a chance. Set the tempo early, baby. Set the tempo early, baby. Set it early.
The NFL playoffs are as unforgiving and unrelenting as anything in North American sports. 17 games of grueling combat leads you to a single game in January, where success is the only option and failure books your ticket to Cancun. The desire to lift that Lombardi trophy must fuel a team through at least 3 and possibly 4 extra games that all follow that single elimination formula. It's about surviving and advancing. It's about being the last soldier standing in the gridiron battlefield. It's about booking that trip to Vegas and hoisting the Lombardi above your head on the second Sunday of February. As with everything in football, the timeline for success is short and intense. The window of opportunity could only stay open for so long before nagging injuries deplete a roster, salary cap issues, or age slam that window shut. Need I remind you all of Saxonville, Cam's dabbing Panthers, those Atlanta Falcons? The opportunity closes as quick as it opens, and for those teams, and almost all good teams, their best shot at glory passes them in brutal fashion. Which is what makes the NFL playoffs so great. The ever-present sense of urgency, the desperation to fight for every last blade of grass between those white lines, the determination to etch your name in history among the greats. For 14 teams, that journey to the Super Bowl began this January. Some returning and looking to finally get over the hump, some being fresh faces looking to stamp their authority, and some looking to repeat previous glory. This was the 2024 NFL Playoffs. Yeah, wildcard weekend, for me at least, was kind of a dud. What did I just build up over the last 5 minutes, gassing up this huge, glorious battle, and then they give us this on wildcard weekend? A young Houston team proved they're legit against the depleted Browns, but that game was a blowout. The Dolphins were frozen out by the Chiefs in one of the coldest games ever, but that game was a blowout and boring and on Peacock, so I mean, it was kind of trash. And then we had the Cowboys. Here we go! Yeah! Here we go! We got our first true upset in the form of the Packers annihilating the Cowboys. They did not beat the Cowboys, they annihilated the Cowboys. And when you take away the whole shock factor and the laughing at the Cowboys factor of it, the game was actually pretty boring, because like I said, the Packers annihilated them. And then we finally got a competitive game after that, as the Lions returned to the playoffs with a bang, hosting their first game in, 30 years? And they survived against the Rams in a pretty close game, so I'll give them that. And then we had Buffalo playing on a Monday afternoon on wildcard weekend, fans trying to dig out their seats and stuff, like what the hell was going on here? But yeah, Buffalo completely outclassed a pretty trash Pittsburgh team. I mean, really, how did the Steelers even make the playoffs? I have to give them credit, because really, what the hell did they make the playoffs for? Look at the roster. They're starting Mason Rudolph at quarterback, and I was supposed to sit down and watch them in a playoff game? What? Like, I give them credit for working to get to the playoffs. They had a solid run game at the end of the year. You know, the defense is always going to show up. We know Mike Tomlin doesn't have losing seasons, blah, 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 whatever. But really, did anyone think Pittsburgh would win that game? It was boring. We knew Buffalo would win. And then we capped it off with another blowout win, because we know Tampa Bay's from the worst division in football. They're going to lose that game easily. Philadelphia's way better than them. Excuse me, what? You're telling me Philadelphia lost that game to Tampa Bay? Philadelphia, you did what?
You what?
Nah. I don't care how poorly you ended the season and how bad things were around the Philadelphia camp. How did you lose to the Buccaneers in this game? I don't want to diss the Buccaneers. I like Baker Mayfield. I like that team. I thought they worked very hard to get to the playoffs, but really, Philadelphia? Really? All season, you were meant to be one of the top contenders for the Super Bowl, and yet you're going to stumble on the first block of the playoffs, which just happens to be the winner of the NFC South of all divisions? Come on, let's be real, Philadelphia. Really? Come on now. Your Cowboys is showing. Oh my goodness. So I guess you could say Tampa Bay shocked Philly, but when you really think about it, it's not really a shock. Like, they came onto that field and they completely outclassed Philadelphia because they're the team on the ascendancy. They won a lot of games at the end of the year to get into the playoffs. Meanwhile, Philadelphia tripped over themselves into this position. And it showed on the field. Philly sucked. Die, Eagles, die. Like, you guys were a glorified FCS team after you won your Super Bowl against the Chiefs in midseason. The Buccaneers played well and proved that they belonged in the playoffs, but the more pressing thing from this game was just how bad the Eagles were and how they went out with a whimper. And speaking of whimpers, that's how a lot of teams went out in this wildcard weekend. The way I saw it was they were weeding out all the pretenders, and all the real teams were now getting together to play and actually go to war in that divisional weekend. And that divisional weekend started with the Ravens against the Texans, which actually ended up being a very good game. It was 10-10 at halftime. I mean, when you look at the rosters to start the game, you'd expect the Ravens to handle the Texans pretty easily. But those Texans were playing with house money. They're young, they're confident, they're expressive, they're aggressive, and they really put in a good performance against the Ravens, but at the end of the day, the Ravens were just too good for them, and they sent them home packing. The Ravens, and especially Lamar Jackson, had to win that game. Because, let's be real, they were on some serious fraud watch if they lost that game. If Lamar Jackson got his chain snatched by Stroud in his own stadium, we would have had some talks. But thankfully, Lamar played great, the Ravens played great in the second half, they won the game, on to the next round. And on to the next game, which I already spoke about in my previous video. Yeah, the 49ers won, but they did not look convincing against the Packers, and they had me way too scared in that game. It kind of felt like the youngest team in the league just ran out of steam against a powerhouse 49ers team. Meanwhile, the Bucs were still proving their validity when they played the Lions in this round and gave them a pretty good fight, but they just didn't have enough in the end to topple this super talented Lions team that's playing on such a high in front of that crazy crowd. And then the weekend ended with what many people saw as the main event, Josh Allen against Patrick Mahomes again. We all know what happens when these teams meet in the playoffs, and they delivered yet again, a back and forth game where both teams struggled to grasp full control, and in the end, the Bills, who were trying to overcome their past demons, ended up rehashing some pretty terrible memories for their fans. There's no way Bass would kick it wide, right? Wide right? Wide right? It's alright, Bills fans, there's always next year. Which will probably lose to Mahomes again next year. Who are we kidding? The early slate in championship weekend served as Lamar versus Mahomes, and what felt like the entire world against Mahomes and the Chiefs. You all saw the TikToks and the tweets before this game came around, the Save Us Lamar gimmick, Lamerica. All this solidified was that the Chiefs are really the new New England Patriots, because people are tired of seeing them win all the time. And Mahomes took that torch from Brady and said, you know what, we're going to keep winning. Oh, you want Lamerica to win? How about I go snatch his chain in his own hood? Actually, Mahomes wouldn't sound like that. It'd be more like, oh, you want Lamerica to win?
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
And so, big surprise, the Chiefs won again and booked their ticket to their 4th Super Bowl in 5 years. It felt like all that playoff experience the Chiefs had is what overcame the Ravens in the end. Because let's call a spade, the Ravens crumbled. The Ravens had the much better team going into this game. Look at the receiving core for the Chiefs. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Rashee Rice. Is this really inspiring you in any way? No, because it shouldn't. The Ravens were way better than them. And the Chiefs deserve a lot of credit for the way they played in this game. The defense has really stepped up in this playoffs, and even those receivers I named are stepping up in big moments when it mattered. But the Ravens completely got away from their own game, and that's why they lost. They ran the ball to a running back 6 times the entire game. That's not a typo, that's not a mistake. They ran the ball 6 times for a run-heavy team. And not just a run-heavy team, but a run-heavy team playing against a defense that doesn't defend the run as well as the pass. What was the logic? Oh, and the refs had nothing to do with it. I know it's a new thing now to hype up this Mahomes NFL refs love affair thing, but when you really go back and look at all the flags that were called, the Ravens were being so stupid. Headbutting a guy about 25 centimeters away from the referee? Yeah, good thinking. Pushing a guy down and spinning the ball in his face after a huge reception, you could have just asked for the taunting flag, it would have been easier. Clotheslining Mahomes, headhunting Mahomes. This is way more to do with the Ravens losing their focus and losing their discipline than it is about the Chiefs having a love affair with the refs. So you all could just shut up about that, stop being casuals. I even wanted the Ravens to win this game. I like Mahomes quite a bit, but I wanted Lamar Jackson to have his time, and I thought this was the best year for him to do it. But if you watch that game with your eyes, you'd see the refs had nothing to do with what happened on that field. It had everything to do with the Ravens choking. They lost their composure, they lost their discipline, they lost their identity, and that's why they lost the game. And then it was on to the NFC Championship to see who would go on to play the Chiefs in that Super Bowl. And the Lions came out flying with intent to have them be the ones booking their ticket to Vegas. They are up 24-7, and they just simply couldn't be stopped. They're getting like at least 6 yards every single play that they ran, setting up one of the truest Cinderella story finales you could ever hope for in a Super Bowl. Against the evil powerhouse of Kansas City, it's the David versus Goliath. Everyone wanted the Lions to finally win. It looked like a team who had been terrible for years and years was finally having their moment. But the only problem was it was still only halftime. And bad news, Lions, the clock just struck 12 on your Cinderella story. You want to talk about falling apart? This is Atlanta Falcons levels of falling apart. Defense can't stop a thing. You want to fumble the ball right when you get it back. And then here comes Dan Campbell with his 4th down shtick that he's always doing.
This is Atlantic City all over again.
You've got 20.
Hit me.
Peter, don't.
Hit me.
21.
Hit me.
Peter.
Hit me.
That's 30.
Hit me.
I understand it's your identity to be aggressive, but read the room, man. You lost all momentum in the game and you're going for it on 4th downs when you could take field goals. Just put some points on the board, try and get the momentum back. I don't care what all the analysts say about that's what Dan Campbell's about. He's aggressive. He sticks to his identity. And I know we saw what happened in the early game when you lose your identity like the Ravens did. But all I'm saying is, when you're in that situation, all you're doing is adding fuel to the fire for the 49ers to bring a comeback when you're not putting points on the board. And yeah, the 4th downs were the final nail in the coffin, but it was not the whole reason for that collapse. The way I saw it was the Lions team was on a high that came crashing down. They were young, inexperienced, and they were just living off of that crowd energy in Detroit and the Cinderella story that they had going. And once they finally got punched in the mouth, it stunned them and they just couldn't recover. And yeah, once the Niners came back to control that game and eventually win it, it set up the Super Bowl rematch that no one wanted. It gives a chance to this supremely talented Niners squad to finally get over the hump and exercise their demons from their last Super Bowl loss. But if they can't, then this is the final form of the Kansas City Patriots, the New England Chiefs, if you will. Just a few years after that young and exciting Chiefs team got their first Super Bowl over the Niners, they're now the enemy that we wanted them to conquer. They could have died a hero, but they lived long enough to see themselves become the villain. Reaching 4 Super Bowls in 5 years, it's giving a very familiar feeling of impending success no matter what. Rashee Rice and MVS being their best receivers, they still made it. They're playing terrible all season, they're not looking the same, they still make it. They just keep finding ways to win no matter how much the entire world wants them to lose. Remind you of anybody? In truth, we're about 60 minutes away from flirting with the D word, dynasty. And it's the perfect full circle moment for them too. The team that they beat for their first Super Bowl to start this run is the team they're playing right now to solidify themselves as a dynasty. One thing we learned about this postseason is that success is earned and not written. Go ahead, make an NFL script joke. I dare you. The NFL's all scripted, they're all paid actors. Shut the hell up. Because the reason I say it was earned and not written is because in a time where narratives reign supreme, none of the feel-good stories can overcome the best teams on paper and the possible dynasty in waiting. This ain't the script you wanted, but guess what? We don't care. You will watch Taylor Swift react to the biggest football game of the year, and you're gonna like it, damn it. There is still one last story to write, and we will find out on Sunday if it's Mr. Irrelevant leading the Niners back to glory, or if it's Patrick Mahomes and his Kansas City Chiefs continuing to solidify their dynasty. But on the road to that game, we had blowout games in Siberia, Pittsburgh getting shellacked again, the Cowboys being the Cowboys, the Eagles doing their best Cowboys impression, the Lions still finding ways to torture their fan base, and the Ravens letting a golden opportunity slip away. This was the 2024 NFL Playoffs.